I mocked him. I mocked all of them. Fuzzy Zoeller spent decades ridiculing the same golfers over and over, and today we're diving into the 5 men he hated more than anyone else on tour. These weren't random targets. Each one represented something Zoeller found deeply offensive about modern golf. Each one broke his philosophy of how the game should be played, and each one got worse as the sport changed around him. This is the story of a jester who watched his world disappear and fought back the only way he knew how. Fuzzy Zoeller was different from the start. He believed that to be great at golf, you needed something raw inside. He called it a bit of dirt. Not literal dirt, but an edge, a toughness that came naturally, not from grinding and suffering and turning the game into homework. He believed winners were made from natural talent, combined with mental toughness, not from swing coaches and perfect mechanics and turning yourself into a robot. And he believed the game was supposed to be fun, not serious. Not a war, just fun. That was the whole philosophy. Play fast, have fun. Make jokes with the gallery. Don't take yourself so seriously that you forget you're hitting a white ball around a field. But everywhere Zoeller looked in the late 70s, the 80s, and into the 90s, he saw players who rejected this. He saw players building themselves into machines. He saw players who looked miserable even when winning. He saw players who the media hyped into giants when they were just ordinary men with good putting streaks, and he couldn't help himself. He mocked them, all of them. But 5 stood out more than the rest. The first was Greg Norman, the great white shark, the man with the biggest game in golf. Norman could hit the ball further and higher than anyone Zoeller ever faced. He had the swagger. He had the brand. He had everything you needed to win major championships. Except one thing. When the pressure got tight, Norman broke. Zoeller saw this early. At the 1984 U.S. Open at Winged Foot, they went to an 18-hole playoff. It was supposed to be a clash of titans. Zoeller came out and dismantled him. He shot 67, Norman shot 75, 8 strokes, in a single-day playoff for the U.S. Open. Zoeller made jokes with the gallery the whole way. He acted like it was nothing. And Norman waved the towel, the white towel, and Zoeller saw it for what it was. Not a joke, not levity, a man looking for a way out when the pressure became too much. But this didn't stop Norman. He kept losing when it mattered. Zoeller watched as Norman couldn't close out the 1986 Masters, then the 1986 PGA, then the 1987 Masters again. Always pressure moments. Always when his opponent stepped up and Norman folded. The media called it bad luck, a tragic hero narrative. Zoeller called it what it was. Mental weakness. A fragile player pretending to be tough. Then came 1996. Norman had a 6-stroke lead going into the final round of the Masters. One final chance to prove Zoeller wrong, to show that he could handle the heat, to prove he was the great white shark and not just the great white choker. But he didn't. He shot 78 and lost by 6 strokes to Nick Faldo. That was the validation Zoeller needed. Norman wasn't a tragic hero. He was a pattern. He was a player who couldn't handle direct confrontation. He was a paper shark pretending to be real. And Zoeller never let him forget it. The second golfer on Zoeller's list was Tom Watson. And with Watson, it wasn't just about losing. It was about philosophy. Watson won at the 1979 Masters in a playoff with Zoeller. But that playoff told you everything you needed to know. Watson was grinding his teeth. Watson was intense. Watson looked like he was going to war. Zoeller was loose. He was joking, he was having fun, and Zoeller won. The Clown Prince beat the robot in a sudden death playoff. But Watson represented something much bigger. He represented the seriousness that was killing golf. Watson took everything too seriously. The game became homework for him. It became a problem to solve rather than a game to play. He took his already suspect swing and tried to intellectualize it. He tried to fix it through relentless, joyless toil. Zoeller and Watson had similarly ugly swings back then. The media called them both ham-fisted hookers, but Zoeller owned it. He made it work. Watson tried to remake himself into a robot, and that disgusted Zoeller. Even worse, Watson's seriousness extended to how he thought the course should be set up. He approved of tricky setups. He liked rough. He wanted par to be a struggle. He wanted golf to be miserable. Zoeller watched this and saw a man who was draining the life out of the game for everyone else. When Augusta made the course tougher and tougher, Zoeller blamed Watson and guys like him. They wanted the game to hurt. Zoeller wanted the game to sing. The third was Nick Faldo. And Faldo was worse than Watson in every way that mattered to Zoeller. Faldo took the intellectualization of golf to its logical extreme. In the mid-80s, he blew up his swing and rebuilt it from scratch under David Ledbetter. He hit balls into a net for 2 years. He broke his motion down into mechanical positions. He turned himself into an engineer. He removed every bit of feel, every bit of instinct, every bit of humanity. Zoeller saw this and called it exactly what it was: robotic, forced, calculated. Faldo checked positions. He rehearsed his takeaway like he was operating a crane. There was no flow, no rhythm, just mechanics. And the worst part was that it worked. Faldo became one of the best players in the world. But he did it by sacrificing everything that made golf beautiful. When Faldo won the 1996 Masters, his margin of victory came from his ability to execute that robotic 67, clinical, cold, emotionless. Zoeller watched Faldo's reaction to winning and found it sterile. No joy, no celebration, just a stoic nod like he was closing a business deal. That was the corporate golfer. That was the future Zoeller feared. A game run by swing coaches and data and optimization and soulless efficiency. What made it worse was Faldo's arrogance off the course. Faldo barely socialized with other players. He kept everyone at arm's length. He was isolated, and he wanted everyone to know it. Zoeller, who thrived on camaraderie and laughter, found this offensive. Faldo represented the death of fun. Faldo represented the arrival of the era Zoeller hated most. The fourth target was Curtis Strange, and Strange represented something different. He represented hype. He represented a player who was elevated by the media far beyond what his talent actually justified. During the late 80s, Strange won back-to-back U.S. Opens. He was the first to earn $1 million in a season. The American media went crazy. They needed a hero to stand against the European Big Five. So they made Curtis Strange into something he wasn't. Zoeller saw through this immediately. Strange was a good player, a solid grinder, but he wasn't transcendent. He was riding a hot putter and media hype. Once the putter cooled down, Strange fell off a cliff, and that proved Zoeller right. Strange was inflated. People were making him bigger than he really was, but it went deeper. In 1985 at Bay Hill, Zoeller and Strange went head-to-head in brutal conditions. 84 degrees. Difficult course. Zoeller shot 67 to win by 2 strokes. This was right after Zoeller came back from major back surgery. He was fighting for his career, and he beat Strange in a test of manhood. After the round, Zoeller delivered a perfect line. He said those finishing holes bring out the man in you. He was directly implying that Strange had been tested and found wanting, that the tough guy image was fake, that Zoeller the Joker had out-toughed the grinder when it actually mattered. Strange was arrogant too. He would talk down to players. He had condescension dripping from everything he said. But Zoeller saw the insecurity underneath. Zoeller made fun of people to keep them grounded. Strange used condescension to elevate himself, and that lack of self-awareness drove Zoeller crazy. Strange believed his own press clippings, and in Zoeller's world, that was a cardinal sin. The fifth golfer was Ben Crenshaw, and Crenshaw was different from the other 4. He wasn't a choker like Norman. He wasn't serious like Watson. He wasn't robotic like Faldo. He wasn't overhyped like Strange. Ben Crenshaw was something else entirely. He was too nice. He was gentle Ben. He was a historian of the game. He treated golf like a religion. He wept openly about the spirit of Bobby Jones. He talked about Augusta like it was sacred ground. Zoeller found this soft. He found it weak. His philosophy required a bit of dirt. You need an edge to win in the mud and the wind. You need to be willing to be nasty, to attack the course, to not care about tradition or reverence. Crenshaw cared too much. He was too respectful, and in Zoeller's mind, that made him vulnerable. A player who is busy revering the course is not attacking it. When Crenshaw won the 1995 Masters just days after the death of his mentor, Harvey Penick, the golf world dissolved into tears. It was the ultimate sentimental moment, the perfect story. But Zoeller didn't see poetry. He saw melodrama. He saw a player treating a golf game like it was a spiritual experience, and he couldn't help but mock it. Crenshaw was untouchable, though. You couldn't make fun of Gentle Ben without looking like a villain. That infuriated Zoeller even more. His primary weapon was humor, but Crenshaw's earnestness acted as a shield. Zoeller couldn't get under his skin the way he could with the others. What tied all 5 together was their role in killing the game Zoeller loved. Norman's hype and fragility helped create the modern superstar narrative. Watson's seriousness and grind mentality set the tone for how players would approach the sport. Faldo's mechanization showed everyone that you could turn golf into engineering. Strange proved that the media could build a player bigger than he deserved to be. Crenshaw showed that reverence and emotional softness could be rewarded. They were the architects of modern professional golf, and Zoeller was the last voice crying out that they were building something wrong. He believed the game should be natural and loose and fun. Instead, it became professional and calculated and joyless. He watched players work with swing coaches and sports psychologists. He watched them analyze data. He watched them remove the humanity from the sport, and he watched 5 specific men lead the charge in this direction. In 1997, Tiger Woods emerged, and Tiger represented the final victory of everything Zoeller had fought against. Tiger had Norman's hype and length. He had Watson's intensity and seriousness. He had Faldo's mechanical perfection. He had Strange's cocky confidence. He had Crenshaw's reverence for Masters history. When Zoeller lashed out at Tiger with his infamous comments, he wasn't just attacking one player. He was attacking the ghost of every player he'd been mocking for 2 decades. He was attacking the entire direction golf had taken. He was attacking the death of fun. The golf world's response was swift and merciless. Sponsors dropped him. Media condemned him. And Zoeller understood what had happened. The culture had finally shifted completely. The jokers weren't funny anymore. The serious players and the robots and the nice guys had won. The era of the natural player was over. The era of the corporate athlete had arrived. But here's the thing. Zoeller was right about all of them. Norman did choke. Faldo was robotic. Watson was serious. Strange was overrated. Crenshaw was too soft. The facts proved out. The patterns held. The criticism was valid. He just bet on the wrong future. He believed golf would return to fun. He believed the sport would reject the machines and the grind. He believed players would rebel against the misery. Instead, the sport became more robotic, more serious, more corporate, more data-driven, more optimization-obsessed. Everything Zoeller warned against, golf doubled down on. And he became a relic of a dying era, a man who belonged in the golden age of Walter Hagen and Sam Snead. Men who played fast and drank hard and relied on natural talent. Men who made it look easy. Men who actually enjoyed themselves. Zoeller spent his career fighting this tide, whistling down the fairways when others were silent, making jokes when others were grinding, refusing to take the game as seriously as the modern players demanded. For a moment, it seemed he might actually win, like the game might turn back toward fun, but it didn't. The 5 men Zoeller hated most were the architects of modern professional golf. Norman's fragility and hype created the superstar narrative. Watson's intensity and seriousness set the tone for how players would approach competition. Faldo's mechanization proved that you could turn golf into pure engineering. Strange showed the power of media hype in building reputations. Crenshaw proved that reverence and emotional softness could be rewarded in major championships. Fuzzy Zoeller didn't just dislike these 5 golfers. He was fighting a battle he would always lose. He was the last critic of a dying era, the jester in a world that wanted corporate athletes. When you look at what he said, you realize he wasn't wrong. He was just out of step with history. The game moved on. The serious players won decisively. The robots thrived. The irony is that Zoeller was probably the most talented natural player of his era. He proved it by winning a major without swing coaches. He proved it through psychological warfare against Norman in 1984. He proved it with wins over Watson and Strange. He had the goods, but instead of claiming superiority, he chose to mock them and call out their fundamental failures. In doing that, he'd lost the culture war. The culture didn't care about natural talent anymore. It cared about optimization. It cared about systems. It cared about the corporate athlete. Whether Zoeller was ultimately right or wrong is up to you to decide. But nobody can argue that he saw what was coming. He saw it clearly in Norman's fragility. He saw it in Watson's seriousness. He saw it in Faldo's complete mechanization. He saw it in Strange's inflated hype and Crenshaw's softness. The phonies won. The robots won. The serious players completely rebuilt the entire game in their image. And the jester was left whistling alone in the wind, the last critic of a dying era. That's the complete story of Fuzzy Zoeller and the 5 golfers he hated more than anyone else.